You are embarrassing yourself, Marcus. Vanessa Cole's voice cut through the restaurant like a knife. Every table went silent. Crystal glasses stopped moving. Phones slowly lifted into the air. Marcus Reed stood frozen beside the engagement display, his old work jacket stained with oil, his hands still shaking from rushing there straight from the garage. Vanessa looked flawless in her white designer dress. Diamonds sparkled around her neck. Behind her stood Damian Brooks in a custom black suit, smiling like Marcus was nothing more than dirt under expensive shoes. Marcus swallowed hard. Vanessa, please, just let me explain. Vanessa laughed in his face. Cold. Sharp. Cruel. Explain what? That you are still broke. A few guests chuckled. Someone whispered loud enough to hear. Why would she ever date a mechanic? Marcus tightened his grip around a small worn paper bag in his hand. Inside was the only thing he had left. A silver ring box. Not expensive. Not perfect. But real. His eyes looked tired. Like a man who had not slept in days. Like a man carrying too much pain alone. He glanced at the hospital bracelet still hanging from his wrist under his sleeve. Aunt Lillian needed medicine tonight. He had spent his last dollars trying to help her. And still, he came here. Because some part of him still believed Vanessa remembered who he used to be. I did not come to ruin your night, Marcus said quietly. I just wanted 5 minutes. Vanessa stepped closer. Her expensive heels clicked against the marble floor. You should have stayed in your little garage. Then she slapped him. Hard. Gasps exploded across the restaurant. Marcus stumbled sideways into a champagne tower. Glass rattled. Cameras lifted higher. Somebody started recording openly now. Vanessa pointed at him like he was garbage. Look at him. Dirty clothes. Empty pockets. Still chasing me like a lost dog. Damian smirked and wrapped an arm around her waist. Security, he called casually. Get him out before he ruins the event. 2 guards started moving toward Marcus. He raised both hands quickly. Please. Please do not do this. His voice cracked. I loved you, Vanessa. Silence hit the room for one painful second. Then Gloria Cole, Vanessa's mother, stood up from the VIP table with disgust written all over her face. Love does not pay bills, she snapped. Love does not belong in wealthy families. More whispers spread through the crowd. He thought he had a chance. Pathetic. Look at his shoes. Marcus lowered his head. His sneakers were worn out. Rainwater stains still marked the sides. One guard grabbed his arm roughly. The paper bag fell. The ring box rolled across the polished floor. A young waitress near the bar bent down slowly, looking shocked. Wait, she whispered softly. He was going to propose. For one tiny moment, the room changed. A flicker of sympathy crossed a few faces. Even Damian looked surprised. But Vanessa crushed it instantly. Do not touch that trash, she said coldly. Then she kicked the ring box aside with her heel. Marcus stared at it in silence. Something inside him broke right there. The waitress tried to help him up, but Gloria stepped between them. Do not involve yourself with failures, she warned. Phones kept recording. Guests kept staring. Nobody defended him. Nobody. As the guards dragged Marcus toward the exit, his old metal keychain slipped from his pocket and hit the marble floor. A small silver aviation logo gleamed under the chandelier lights. Damian frowned immediately. Where did you get that? Marcus quickly grabbed it and hid it in his fist. It is nothing, he muttered. But Damian kept staring. Because rich men knew symbols. And that logo did not belong to poor mechanics. Outside, Heavy rain poured onto the streets of Atlanta. The guards threw Marcus down the restaurant steps. His paper bag landed in a puddle beside him. Laughter echoed faintly from inside the glowing ballroom behind the glass walls. Marcus slowly stood up, drenched, humiliated, alone. Then his phone vibrated. Unknown number. He almost ignored it. But the second he answered, a calm woman's voice spoke carefully through the storm. "Mr. Reed," she said. "The jet has landed. Everyone is waiting for you." Rain hammered the streets of Atlanta as Marcus Reed stood under the flickering light outside the restaurant, his phone pressed tightly against his ear. Water dripped from his soaked jacket. Cars rushed past him without slowing down. Behind the glass walls, laughter and music still echoed from Vanessa's engagement celebration. "Mr. Reed," the woman's calm voice repeated through the phone. "The board has been waiting for your confirmation all evening." Marcus closed his eyes for 1 second. Tired. Hurt. Humiliated. "Not tonight, Evelyn," he said quietly. "I have other problems." A black luxury SUV slowly rolled to the curb across the street. Dark windows. Silent engine. Marcus barely noticed it. But inside the vehicle, a man in an expensive charcoal suit watched him carefully. Damian Brooks. He had followed Marcus outside after seeing that silver aviation keychain. Something about it disturbed him. "Run the logo again," Damian muttered to the driver. The driver glanced down at a tablet. His face tightened immediately. "Sir, this symbol belongs to Reed Aviation Holdings." Damian frowned. "That company owns half the private cargo routes in the Southeast." Inside the SUV, silence grew heavy. Across the street, Marcus lowered the phone. "I said I cannot do this tonight." Evelyn's voice softened slightly. "Your aircraft cannot remain waiting forever, sir." "Sir." Damian heard that word through the cracked window. His expression changed instantly. Meanwhile, Marcus shoved the phone back into his pocket and started walking through the rain. His old sneakers splashed through dirty water. His shoulders looked heavy. Not like a powerful man. Like someone carrying too much pain alone. He stopped outside a small 24-hour pharmacy. Through the window, he stared at the medicine counter for several long seconds before stepping inside. Bright white lights exposed everything. His soaked clothes. His trembling hands. The faded mechanic patch stitched onto his jacket. He pulled crumpled bills from his pocket carefully. "Please," Marcus asked the cashier softly. "Can I pay half tonight? My aunt needs these pills before morning." The cashier looked uncomfortable. "I am sorry. Store policy." Marcus lowered his head. For a moment, he looked completely defeated. Then another voice spoke behind him. "I will cover it." Marcus turned quickly. It was the same young waitress from the restaurant. Her name tag read Kiera. She held out her card with nervous hands. "You did not deserve what happened back there," she whispered. Marcus shook his head immediately. "No. Keep your money." "Please," Kiera said. "I saw your face when she kicked the ring away." Silence filled the pharmacy. Marcus looked away fast, ashamed of the tears building in his eyes. Tiny hope flickered for one fragile second. Somebody believed he was not worthless. Somebody saw his pain. But the moment shattered when the pharmacy television suddenly flashed Vanessa and Damian's engagement photos across a local entertainment segment. "Atlanta businessman Damian Brooks celebrates luxury engagement tonight," the reporter announced cheerfully. Vanessa appeared smiling beside Damian in diamonds and silk. Kiera glanced nervously at Marcus. Other customers started whispering. One man recognized him immediately. "Wait. Is that the broke guy who got slapped online tonight?" Another customer lifted a phone. The video was already spreading. Marcus stepped back instantly. Humiliation hit him all over again. I should leave, he muttered. Kiera looked angry now. People are cruel. Marcus forced a weak smile. Rich people usually win. Outside, the black SUV remained parked in silence. Damien watched Marcus through the pharmacy window carefully now. Something no longer made sense. A poor mechanic should not receive calls from private aviation executives. A poor mechanic should not carry the symbol of Reed Aviation Holdings. And yet Marcus looked genuinely desperate trying to buy medicine. Who are you really? Damien whispered under his breath. Back inside the pharmacy, Marcus picked up the small paper bag of medicine at last. As he turned to leave, an old photograph slipped halfway out of his wallet onto the floor. Kiera bent down quickly to grab it. Her eyes widened immediately. The photo showed a much younger Marcus standing beside a private jet, and next to him stood a man Damien recognized instantly from business magazines across America. Kiera looked up slowly. Marcus, she whispered shakily. Why are you standing next to Charles Reed? Marcus's face went pale. At that exact moment, the pharmacy doors opened behind him. Damien Brooks stepped inside. Damien Brooks froze the moment he stepped into the pharmacy. Rainwater dripped from the shoulders of his expensive coat as his eyes locked onto the photograph in Kiera's trembling hands. Show me that picture, he said sharply. Marcus moved fast for the first time all night. He snatched the photograph back and shoved it deep into his wallet. It is private. Damien stared at him harder now. Not with arrogance anymore. With suspicion. Why are you standing next to Charles Reed? Marcus looked exhausted. You should go back to your party. Answer the question. Silence filled the pharmacy. Even the cashier stopped moving. Marcus tightened his jaw. I said it does not matter. Then his cracked phone started vibrating again. Hospital. Marcus's face changed instantly. Fear replaced everything else. He answered immediately. Hello. A weak older voice came through the speaker. Marcus, Aunt Lillian coughed painfully. The nurse says they need payment before morning. Marcus closed his eyes. I am coming right now. Do not lose your dignity because of me, Aunt Lillian whispered softly. Too late, Marcus said under his breath. He grabbed the medicine bag and rushed toward the door. Damien stepped aside slowly, still watching him carefully. Kiera looked between both men nervously. Something felt wrong now. Nothing about Marcus matched the image Vanessa painted online. Outside, cold rain covered the streets. Marcus climbed onto an old city bus instead of calling a cab. Damien remained standing under the pharmacy lights, staring at the wet street long after the bus disappeared. Find everything on Marcus Reed, he ordered quietly into his phone. Tonight. Across the city, the luxury ballroom still glowed with music and champagne. Vanessa laughed beside wealthy guests while servers carried gold trays through the crowd. Giant flower walls surrounded her engagement photos. Reporters waited outside. Everything looked perfect. But Vanessa noticed Damien was gone too long. Where is he? She asked impatiently. Gloria Cole folded her arms. Probably handling business. Rich men do not chase mechanics. Vanessa smiled at first, then slowly stopped. Because deep inside, she remembered the look on Marcus's face when he picked up that silver aviation keychain. It was not fear. It was restraint. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus stepped into St. Mary's Community Hospital. The bright lights exposed how tired he really looked. His wet clothes clung to his body. His eyes were red from exhaustion. Nurses moved quickly through crowded hallways. Old ceiling fans rattled overhead. Children cried in distant rooms. This was not the world of diamond rings and ballroom music. This was survival. Marcus reached Aunt Lillian's room and forced himself to smile before entering. I brought your medicine. Aunt Lillian lay weak beneath thin blankets. Oxygen tubes rested beneath her nose. But when she saw Marcus soaked from the storm, sadness filled her eyes immediately. "She hurt you again," she whispered. Marcus looked away silently. Aunt Lillian reached for his hand carefully. "That woman never saw your true heart." Marcus swallowed hard. True hearts do not pay hospital bills. A nurse entered holding a clipboard. Her expression was apologetic. "Mr. Reed, the overdue balance increased tonight." Marcus stiffened. "I already paid last week." There were emergency procedures added. She lowered her voice gently. "If payment does not arrive tomorrow morning, administration may transfer her out." Aunt Lillian turned her face toward the wall quietly. Shame filled the room. Marcus looked down at his empty wallet. 2 crumpled dollars remained inside. That was all. Tiny hope came one moment later when his phone buzzed again. "Evelyn Carter." Marcus answered softly. "What now?" Evelyn's voice remained calm and professional. "The board approved your transfer request. Funds can reach your account within 1 hour." Marcus immediately shook his head even though she could not see him. "No. Not yet." "Sir," Evelyn replied carefully, "you cannot continue living like this." Marcus looked at Aunt Lillian sleeping weakly under dim hospital lights. "I made a promise." But before Evelyn could answer, the hospital room door suddenly opened again. Marcus expected another nurse. Instead, a tall man in a dark tailored coat stepped inside slowly. Damian Brooks. Marcus stood immediately. Tension exploded through the tiny room. Damian looked around at the peeling walls, the old medical machines, the unpaid bill resting near Marcus's hand. Then his eyes landed on Aunt Lillian. Her weak face turned pale the second she saw him. And then she whispered one sentence that made Damian stop breathing for a moment. "You have his father's eyes. You have his father's eyes." The hospital room fell completely silent after Aunt Lillian whispered those words. Damian Brooks stared at her in shock. Marcus moved instantly. "She is tired," he said quickly. "She does not know what she is saying." But Aunt Lillian kept looking directly at Damian. Weak. Pale. Frightened. Like she had just revealed something dangerous by mistake. Damian stepped closer to the hospital bed slowly. "Whose father?" he asked quietly. Marcus's voice hardened for the first time. "Leave." The tension inside the tiny room became unbearable. Old machines beeped softly beside Aunt Lillian while rain tapped against the hospital window. Damian looked around again at the peeling paint, the unpaid medical bills, the cheap plastic chair beside the bed where Marcus clearly spent nights sleeping. Nothing matched the image inside his head anymore. "A poor mechanic does not get private aviation calls," Damian muttered. "A poor mechanic does not know Charles Reed." Marcus clenched his jaw. "You already have everything. Why do you care?" Damian did not answer immediately. Because deep down, he was starting to care for one reason only. Reed Aviation Holdings was the exact company he desperately needed to save his collapsing business deal. And somehow, this broken man standing in a community hospital seemed connected to it. Aunt Lillian suddenly began coughing violently. Marcus rushed to hold her carefully. "Slow down. Please." A nurse hurried inside and checked the monitors quickly. "Only family should remain," she said firmly. Damian stepped back toward the door, but before leaving, he looked at Marcus one more time. "This story is bigger than you are admitting." Marcus lowered his eyes. "Some stories destroy people." Damian walked out slowly into the dim hospital hallway. The polished floor reflected the expensive shine of his shoes while exhausted families slept on plastic benches nearby. Wealth and suffering stood side by side under cold fluorescent lights. Damian immediately pulled out his phone. "Evelyn Carter," he said after the call connected. Silence. Then a calm female voice answered. Who is this? Damian Brooks. Another silence. Short. Careful. How did you get this number? Damian leaned against the wall. I think we both know Marcus Reed. Evelyn's tone changed instantly. Colder now. You should stay away from him. Why? Because you do not understand what you are touching. The call ended abruptly. Damian stared at the dead screen. His suspicion deepened immediately. Meanwhile, across town, Vanessa finally noticed Damian was not answering her messages. The ballroom lights still glittered around her, but irritation slowly replaced her smile. Where is he? She snapped again. Gloria Cole frowned. You are letting that mechanic ruin your engagement night. Vanessa grabbed her phone and replayed the viral restaurant video. Marcus standing soaked and humiliated. Marcus begging. Marcus holding that cheap ring box. But then she paused the video suddenly. Her eyes narrowed. The silver aviation keychain flashed briefly in Marcus's hand. Vanessa froze. Mom, she whispered carefully. Have you ever heard of Reed Aviation Holdings? Gloria looked confused. Of course. Billion-dollar company. Vanessa's face slowly lost color. Back at the hospital, Damian stood outside the records office watching an old clerk search through archived files. I need patient information connected to Lillian Carter, Damian said. Family emergency. The clerk hesitated. Those files are restricted. Damian quietly placed several $100 bills on the desk. The clerk looked around nervously before unlocking an old storage cabinet. Dusty folders filled the shelves. The clerk pulled one out slowly. Lillian Carter, he muttered. No husband listed. One dependent. Damian leaned closer. Marcus Reed? No, the clerk answered. That is the strange part. Damian's eyes sharpened immediately. What do you mean? The clerk flipped through yellowed pages carefully. The dependent name was changed years ago. Tiny hope sparked. A real clue. A real trail. Damian reached for the folder fast. But his expression darkened instantly. Several pages had been ripped out cleanly. Who removed these? He demanded. The clerk looked frightened now. I do not know. At that exact moment, Damian's phone buzzed again. Vanessa. He ignored it. Then another message arrived immediately after. A photo. Damian opened it slowly. His face changed the second he saw it. Vanessa had zoomed in on the silver aviation keychain from the viral video. Under the Reed Aviation logo was a tiny engraved phrase almost impossible to notice before. Founder Family Access. Founder Family Access. Damian Brooks stared at the tiny engraved words beneath the Reed Aviation logo while standing alone in the hospital records room. His heartbeat slowed. Then sharpened again. Somebody had hidden Marcus Reed on purpose. The ripped pages. The changed dependent name. Aunt Lillian's frightened reaction. None of this was accidental anymore. Damian immediately called his assistant. Lock every meeting tomorrow, he ordered coldly. And find out why hospital files connected to Marcus Reed were altered. Yes, sir. But before the call ended, another voice suddenly interrupted from behind him. You should stop digging. Damian turned sharply. Vanessa stood near the doorway in her white engagement dress, her makeup still flawless, but tension filled her eyes now. Why are you here? Damian asked. Vanessa crossed her arms slowly. Because you disappeared from our engagement party chasing a mechanic. Damian held up the phone screen showing the engraved keychain image. Do you know what this means? Vanessa forced a laugh. It means he stole something expensive. But her voice sounded too quick. Too defensive. Damian noticed immediately. You already knew about this company, did not you? Vanessa stepped closer. Listen to me carefully. Marcus is a liar. He always wanted people to feel sorry for him. Damien studied her face in silence. Then why are you nervous? For 1 second, Vanessa had no answer. Back inside Aunt Lillian's room, Marcus sat quietly beside the hospital bed holding her frail hand. The old woman looked exhausted. You should leave before this gets worse, she whispered weakly. Marcus shook his head immediately. I am not leaving you here alone. Some truths bring danger, Aunt Lillian said softly. Marcus lowered his eyes. I buried that truth years ago. The room fell silent again until the nurse returned holding another payment notice. Mr. Reed, administration needs confirmation tonight. Marcus stared at the number. Higher now. Much higher. His face tightened with quiet panic. I need more time. I am sorry, the nurse replied gently. Without payment, your aunt may lose this room tomorrow. Marcus rubbed both hands over his face slowly. Humiliation followed him everywhere now. At the restaurant. On the internet. Inside this hospital. Tiny Hope appeared 1 moment later when Kiera arrived carrying a small food bag. I thought you might not have eaten, she said softly. Marcus looked surprised. You did not need to come here. Maybe somebody should. Aunt Lillian smiled faintly at the young waitress. For one brief moment, warmth entered the cold room. But it shattered instantly when Gloria Cole suddenly appeared outside the glass hospital door with 2 men in dark suits behind her. Marcus stood immediately. Gloria walked inside like she owned the building. There he is, she announced loudly. Nearby nurses turned to look. Patients in the hallway whispered. Phones slowly lifted again. Marcus's stomach tightened. Gloria held up printed screenshots from the viral restaurant video. This man has been harassing my daughter for weeks. Marcus stared at her in disbelief. That is not true. Gloria ignored him completely. Now he is stalking my future son-in-law inside a hospital. The 2 suited men stepped forward. Lawyers. We are preparing a restraining order, one of them said coldly. Kiera immediately spoke up. He did nothing wrong. Gloria's eyes snapped toward her. Careful. Poor girls lose jobs very easily. Kiera fell silent instantly. Social pressure crushed the room again. Nobody wanted trouble with powerful families. Damien finally entered behind them. Enough, he said sharply. The hallway quieted immediately. Gloria turned toward him with fake concern. Damien, this man is manipulating everyone. Marcus looked directly at Damien now. Tired. Humiliated. But still standing. I never asked anyone for anything, he said quietly. Damien noticed something then. Marcus's hands. Grease stains still covered his fingers from work. But wrapped around his wrist beneath the hospital bracelet was an old leather band with a tiny silver crest burned into the material. The exact same crest Damien had once seen hanging inside Charles Reed's executive office. Tiny hope flickered again. Another impossible connection. Damien stepped closer slowly. Where did you get that bracelet? Marcus instantly pulled his sleeve down. It belongs to my family. Gloria's face changed for the first time. Fear. Small. Fast. But real. Damien saw it immediately. So did Vanessa standing silently in the hallway behind everyone. And before anyone could speak again, Marcus's cracked phone suddenly buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. One image attached. An old legal document. At the top of the page, barely visible beneath faded ink, were the words, birth record correction. Original name, Marcus Charles Reed. Original name, Marcus Charles Reed. The hospital room went completely silent as the faded legal document glowed on Marcus's cracked phone screen. Damien stared at the name like the air had vanished from the room. Gloria Cole's face drained of color immediately. Vanessa stepped backward slowly near the doorway. Marcus himself looked shaken. Not surprised. Shaken. Like seeing the name again reopen something painful he spent years trying to bury. Damien spoke first. Quiet. Dangerous. Charles Reed had a missing son. Nobody answered him. Aunt Lillian closed her eyes weakly on the hospital bed. Marcus immediately locked the phone screen and shoved it into his pocket. It means nothing. Damien looked directly at him. Then why are people removing hospital records? Because rich people protect themselves, Marcus replied bitterly. Gloria quickly stepped forward before Damien could ask another question. This is ridiculous, she snapped. Anybody can fake a document. But Damien noticed her trembling hand clutching her purse strap. Fear again. Real fear. Tiny hope flickered inside the room for the first time. Somebody powerful finally saw the cracks in the lie. Damien slowly held out his hand toward Marcus. Show me the document. Marcus hesitated. He looked exhausted. Cornered. Humiliated for too long to trust anybody anymore. Every time people see that name, he whispered softly, my life gets worse. Silence followed. Then Aunt Lillian suddenly spoke through weak breaths. Marcus, maybe hiding is hurting you more. Emotional tension filled the room immediately. Vanessa stepped forward sharply. Damien, stop this right now. Damien ignored her completely. Who sent the document? Marcus lowered his eyes. Unknown number. Convenient, Gloria muttered coldly. But then Kiera quietly pulled out her own phone. Actually, maybe not. Everyone turned toward her. Nervous, she opened the viral restaurant video again and zoomed in carefully. I thought this was strange earlier. She held up the screen. The room froze. In the blurry footage from the restaurant, right before Vanessa slapped Marcus, his wallet had briefly opened when he reached for the ring box. Inside was the same faded legal paper. Same words. Same name. Marcus Charles Reed. Damien stared hard at the screen. This existed before tonight. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The first real evidence had finally appeared. Vanessa's breathing became uneven. Gloria immediately grabbed for the phone. Delete that. Kiera pulled back instinctively. Why? Gloria's voice rose sharply now. Because this family does not need more gossip spreading online. Damien slowly turned toward Gloria. Why are you acting like this document threatens you personally? Gloria had no answer. Only anger. And fear. If you were standing in that hospital room, what do you think this hidden name really means? And who is trying so hard to keep it buried? The tension exploded again when Vanessa suddenly stepped closer to Marcus. Tell him the truth, she demanded. Tell him you used that name to scam people. Marcus looked stunned. Hurt crossed his face instantly. You know that is not true. Then explain the lies. Vanessa shouted. Why would a billionaire family be connected to a mechanic? Aunt Lillian tried to sit up weakly. Because, Marcus quickly stopped her. No, Damien noticed that immediately. Marcus was protecting her. Not himself. Another clue. Another impossible detail. Tiny hope grew stronger for Damien now. He quietly took Kiera's phone and replayed the restaurant footage frame by frame. Then he paused suddenly. Wait. Everyone looked again. Reflected in the restaurant mirror behind Marcus stood a tall woman near the entrance. Elegant black suit. Silver earrings. Watching Marcus carefully before the slap happened. Damien recognized her instantly. Evelyn Carter. Reed Aviation's executive assistant. Vanessa's face turned pale again. Why would she be there? Nobody answered. Because nobody had an answer yet. Obstacle came seconds later. Damien's phone rang sharply. He answered without looking away from Marcus. His assistant's voice came through urgently. Sir, somebody accessed the Reed family archive tonight. Damien's expression hardened immediately. Who? Silence. Then the assistant answered carefully. The access code belonged to Gloria Cole. The hospital room went dead quiet. Gloria stepped backward slowly. That is impossible. But Damien was already staring at her differently now. Not like a future mother-in-law. Like a woman hiding something dangerous. And before anyone could stop her, Gloria suddenly turned and walked fast toward the exit, pulling out her phone with shaking hands. The last thing Damien heard before the hallway doors closed behind her was one terrified sentence whispered into the phone. He still has the document. He still has the document. Gloria Cole's frightened whisper echoed through Damien's mind long after she disappeared down the hospital hallway. He stood frozen for 1 second, staring at the closed doors. Then he turned slowly back toward Marcus Reed. The room felt different now. Smaller. Heavier. Like the truth was standing there with them, breathing quietly between the machines and unpaid bills. Marcus looked exhausted. His shoulders sagged under years of humiliation and silence. Aunt Lillian coughed softly behind him. Kiera stood near the window holding her phone tightly, still shaken by everything she had seen. Damien finally stepped closer. Not as a businessman this time. As someone trying to understand pain. Nobody touches that document again, he said calmly. Marcus immediately frowned. Why do you care so much? Damien looked directly into his eyes. Because powerful people only panic when something is real. Silence filled the room. Marcus lowered his gaze slowly. He looked like a man too tired to keep running. But still unwilling to trust kindness. Damien noticed the empty medicine bag beside the bed. The overdue hospital balance. The cheap blanket covering Aunt Lillian. Tiny details rich people never noticed before. How long has she been sick? Damien asked quietly. Marcus hesitated. Too long. And you paid for this alone? Marcus gave a bitter smile. Poor people do not have teams of lawyers. That answer hit harder than anger would have. For the first time all night, Damien saw the human cost behind Marcus's silence. Not greed. Not manipulation. Survival. Tiny hope appeared gently when a nurse entered carrying new paperwork. Mr. Reed, she said carefully, someone just covered tonight's emergency balance. Marcus looked confused instantly. What? The nurse nodded softly. Your aunt keeps her room. Marcus turned toward Kiera first. She shook her head quickly. Then he looked at Damien. Damien said nothing. Only adjusted his cufflinks quietly and looked away. Marcus understood immediately. I did not ask for charity. Damien answered softly, good. Because pity insults people. The room went silent again. Emotional tension softened for one fragile moment. Aunt Lillian watched both men carefully now. Like she remembered something neither of them understood yet. Outside the hospital room, Vanessa stood hidden near the corner listening to everything. Rage slowly burned across her face. Damien was protecting Marcus. Listening to him. Believing him. That terrified her more than the document itself. Vanessa immediately pulled Gloria aside near the elevators. This is getting out of control, she hissed. Gloria grabbed her wrist tightly. Then make Marcus disappear from Damien's life. How? Gloria's eyes darkened. Remind everyone he is still poor. Back inside the room, Damien carefully picked up the faded legal document from Marcus's shaking hand. He studied the old ink closely. Water damage. Official seals. A correction order signed years ago. This was not fake. Who kept this hidden? Damien asked. Marcus looked toward Aunt Lillian silently. The old woman closed her eyes. Promises were made, she whispered weakly. Bad promises. Damien noticed another detail then. Folded carefully inside the document was half of an old photograph. He slowly slid it free. The image showed a younger Charles Reed standing beside a private jet. But the other half of the photo had been ripped away years ago. Only one small detail remained visible on the missing side. A child's hand holding a silver bracelet with the same crest Marcus wore tonight. Damien looked up immediately. Where is the rest of this picture? Marcus stiffened. Gone. But Aunt Lillian suddenly whispered something that made the room freeze again. Not gone. Everyone turned toward her. Her weak fingers trembled slightly toward an old brown suitcase hidden beneath the hospital bed. Marcus's face changed instantly. Fear. Real fear. Aunt Lillian, she looked directly at him. You cannot carry this alone forever. Tiny hope rose stronger now. The final piece might still exist. But obstacle crashed down just as quickly. The hospital lights suddenly flickered once. Then again. A nurse ran into the hallway shouting, "Security breach in the records department." Damien's expression sharpened immediately. His phone buzzed seconds later with a new alert from his assistant. Sir, the message read, someone just erased the remaining archived files connected to Marcus Charles Reed. Vanessa slowly stepped into the doorway again pretending surprise, but Damien noticed something immediately. In her trembling hand, she was holding the missing half of the photograph. Vanessa's trembling hand tightened around the missing half of the photograph as everyone in the hospital room stared at her. The ripped image matched perfectly with the piece Damien still held. Same private jet. Same silver bracelet. Same little boy standing beside Charles Reed. For one long second, nobody breathed. Marcus looked at the photo like it hurt him physically to see it again. Where did you get that? He asked quietly. Vanessa forced herself to recover. I found it years ago in my mother's office. Gloria immediately snapped toward her daughter. Vanessa. Warning filled her voice. Sharp. Dangerous. But Damien stepped closer fast. Give me the picture. Vanessa hesitated. Fear flashed across her face again. It proves nothing. Damien's tone hardened. Then you should not be afraid of it. Slowly, reluctantly, Vanessa handed over the torn photograph. Damien carefully aligned both halves together beneath the hospital light. The room fell silent instantly. The image was complete now. Charles Reed stood smiling beside a private jet 20 years earlier. Beside him was a woman holding a small black child wearing the exact bracelet Marcus still carried today. But one detail shocked Damien most. Someone had been deliberately cut out of the original picture before it was torn apart. Only half of a woman's hand remained visible near the child. A diamond ring glimmered faintly beneath the damaged edge. Aunt Lillian looked away immediately. That picture was never supposed to survive, she whispered. Marcus stared at her slowly. You told me my mother destroyed everything. Tears filled the old woman's eyes. She tried. Emotional tension crushed the room. Marcus looked shaken now. Like pieces of his childhood were returning in fragments he never asked to remember. Damien studied the photo carefully again. Who took this picture? Aunt Lillian closed her eyes tightly. The day Charles Reed promised he would protect the boy. Gloria suddenly interrupted sharply. Enough. Everyone turned toward her. Her voice rose with panic hidden beneath anger. This old story means nothing now. But Damien heard the fear clearly. So did Marcus. Tiny hope flickered stronger for the first time inside Marcus's chest. Maybe he was not crazy. Maybe his past had truly been stolen from him. Damien lowered his voice carefully. Marcus, did your mother ever tell you why your name changed? Marcus shook his head slowly. She only said rich families destroy poor people. Silence followed. Heavy silence. Then Aunt Lillian finally opened her trembling hand and pointed weakly toward the old suitcase beneath the bed again. There was a letter, she whispered. A promise letter. Marcus's face tightened instantly. You said it burned in the apartment fire. Aunt Lillian looked ashamed now. I lied. Gloria took one sudden step forward. Do not open old wounds that should stay buried. Damien looked directly at her. Why are you terrified of a letter? Gloria had no answer. Only silence. Dangerous silence. Damien slowly knelt beside the old suitcase and opened it carefully. Inside were worn clothes, faded hospital papers, unpaid bills, and beneath them, a small locked wooden box wrapped in an old baby blanket. Marcus froze immediately when he saw it. I remember that blanket, he whispered softly. His voice sounded younger suddenly. Fragile. Lost. Aunt Lillian nodded weakly. Your mother carried you in it the night she ran. The room fell completely still. Vanessa stared at Marcus differently now. Not with disgust anymore. With confusion. Because the poor mechanic she slapped in public was beginning to look connected to a world far bigger than she understood. Damien carefully lifted the wooden box. The silver crest burned into Marcus's bracelet matched the symbol carved into the lock exactly. Another impossible connection. Another piece of the hidden past. Tiny hope rose again when Damien gently placed the box into Marcus's hands instead of taking it for himself. This belongs to you, he said quietly. Marcus looked stunned. Nobody had protected his dignity in a very long time. But before Marcus could open the box, obstacle crashed down again. Gloria suddenly grabbed Vanessa's arm tightly and whispered in panic, call the mansion. Now. Damien heard it. So did Marcus. Gloria realized too late. Damien slowly stood back up. What is waiting at the mansion? Gloria's face went pale. Nobody answered. Then Aunt Lillian whispered something so softly only Marcus and Damien heard it. The woman who betrayed your mother, still lives there. The hospital room fell into terrified silence. And Marcus slowly looked down at the locked wooden box in his trembling hands, realizing whatever truth waited inside could change everything forever. The woman who betrayed your mother, still lives there. Aunt Lillian's weak whisper hung inside the hospital room like a storm nobody could escape. Marcus stared at the locked wooden box in his trembling hands while Damien slowly turned toward Gloria Cole. Her silence said too much now. Vanessa looked trapped between fear and confusion. The truth was getting too close. And everybody felt it. Gloria suddenly forced a cold smile. This old woman is sick. She is confusing memories with fantasies. But Damien did not look convinced anymore. He studied Gloria carefully. Every nervous breath. Every trembling finger. Then you will not mind if I continue investigating. Gloria's eyes hardened instantly. You are risking your engagement over a mechanic. Marcus looked down quietly. The word mechanic hurt differently now. Like it no longer belonged to him, but still chained him to humiliation. Tiny silence filled the room before Damien spoke again. Tomorrow night, he said calmly, the Brooks Foundation Gala will continue at the mansion. Vanessa looked surprised. After everything? Damien kept his eyes on Gloria. Especially after everything. Marcus immediately understood the danger in Gloria's face. Something bad was coming. Hours later, the storm over Atlanta grew heavier. Marcus returned briefly to his small apartment near the old garage district to change clothes and collect Aunt Lillian's remaining medicine. The building looked tired. Peeling paint. Broken lights. Thin walls. Rain leaked through cracks near the stairwell. His entire life fit inside one worn backpack and a tiny kitchen drawer filled with unpaid bills. Yet even there, trouble followed him. The moment Marcus opened his apartment door, two men in dark suits were already waiting inside. Gloria's lawyers. "Mr. Reed," one said smoothly, "we need your signature." Marcus froze. "How did you get in here?" The second man placed papers onto the small table beside Aunt Lillian's medicine bottles. "A legal agreement." Marcus picked up the document slowly. His expression darkened immediately. In exchange for money and full hospital coverage, he would publicly admit the Reed story was fabricated. "You want me to lie?" One lawyer smiled coldly. "We want this embarrassing situation to disappear." Marcus threw the papers back onto the table. "No," the lawyer stepped closer. "Then your aunt loses her treatment." Emotional pressure crushed the tiny apartment instantly. Marcus looked toward the old medicine bottles near the sink. Nearly empty now. His jaw tightened painfully. "You rich people think money buys truth." "No," the lawyer replied softly. "Money buys silence." Silence filled the room. Marcus looked exhausted. Cornered again. Then his cracked phone suddenly buzzed. "Damien." Marcus almost ignored it. But finally he answered. "What?" Damien's voice stayed calm. "Do not sign anything." Marcus glanced sharply toward the lawyers. "How do you know?" "Because desperate people move fast." Tiny hope flickered for 1 second. Somebody was finally standing between Marcus and the people trying to bury him. But the trap was already bigger than he realized. At the mansion across town, Gloria stood beside a roaring fireplace speaking quietly with Vanessa. Wealth surrounded them. Marble floors. Crystal chandeliers. Expensive silence. Yet fear poisoned the room. "Tomorrow," Gloria whispered carefully, "Marcus will destroy himself publicly." Vanessa looked uneasy now. "What are you planning?" Gloria slowly handed her a tablet. Security footage filled the screen. Edited footage. It showed Marcus near the hospital records room right before the files were erased. Vanessa gasped softly. "You are framing him." Gloria's face remained cold. "I am protecting this family." Back at the apartment, Marcus suddenly heard movement outside his door. Neighbors whispering. Phones recording again. Somebody had leaked his address online. That is the liar from the restaurant. He is pretending to be rich now. Scammer. Humiliation crashed over him all over again. The lawyers smiled faintly. Social pressure was doing the work for them. Marcus grabbed Aunt Lillian's medicine bag tightly. "Get out." One lawyer leaned closer before leaving. "Tomorrow night at the gala, everyone will see who you really are." After they finally left, Marcus collapsed silently into the old kitchen chair. His hands shook. The wooden box still rested beside him unopened. Tiny hope returned only when he noticed something strange. Tucked beneath the legal papers Gloria sent was a second document hidden by mistake. A transportation manifest from 20 years earlier. One line had been circled in red ink. Passenger transfer, infant male, Reed Estate to St. Mary's Community Shelter. Marcus stared at the paper in disbelief. Somebody moved him as a child. Somebody planned this. But before he could process the shock, another obstacle hit. His phone exploded with notifications. News alerts. Viral posts. Edited hospital footage was spreading online already. Headlines flashed everywhere, "Fake Air Scandal Rocks Atlanta Charity Family." Marcus closed his eyes slowly. They were burying him in public before the truth could surface. Then his phone buzzed one final time. Unknown number again. A message appeared beside a single attached video file. Do not trust anyone at the gala, it read. The original camera footage still exists. Marcus's breathing stopped for 1 second. And across town, Gloria Cole smiled confidently inside the mansion ballroom, completely unaware that the final missing evidence was already moving toward Marcus. The grand doors of the Brooks mansion opened beneath flashing camera lights as luxury cars lined the circular driveway outside. Wealth filled every corner of the estate. Crystal chandeliers glowed above marble floors. Politicians, investors, celebrities, and Atlanta's elite moved through the ballroom whispering about only one thing tonight. Marcus Reed. Giant screens stood prepared near the stage for Damian Brooks's charity gala presentation. Security guards watched every entrance carefully. And near the center of it all stood Gloria Cole in a silver gown, smiling like she still controlled the room. But her eyes betrayed her. Fear lived there now. Real fear. Upstairs in a private guest room, Marcus adjusted the sleeves of the only clean black suit he owned. It was old. Slightly too large. But clean. Respectable. He stared at himself in the mirror silently. The same man who had been slapped and humiliated days ago now stood inside one of Atlanta's richest mansions. Yet he still felt poor. Still felt unwanted. The locked wooden box rested beside him on the table. Unopened. Damian entered quietly without knocking. They are ready downstairs. Marcus did not turn around. You still think I belong here? Damian looked at him carefully. I think somebody spent 20 years making sure you believed you did not. Silence followed. Heavy silence. Marcus finally spoke softly. Every rich room I enter feels like a warning. Damian answered just as quietly. Tonight might become the first exception. Downstairs, Vanessa watched guests gather around the ballroom stage while servers carried champagne through the crowd. Phones already streamed the gala live online. She spotted Damian descending the staircase beside Marcus and immediately stiffened. The whispers started at once. That is the mechanic. Why is he here? I thought he was exposed already. Social pressure spread through the room instantly. Marcus heard every word. Felt every stare. But this time, Damian did not walk ahead of him. He walked beside him. Small gesture. Huge difference. Gloria stepped forward immediately before they reached the ballroom center. Damian, she said sharply, you are humiliating this family. Damian calmly held her gaze. Truth does not humiliate families. Lies do. The room quieted around them. Vanessa quickly grabbed a microphone with trembling confidence. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced loudly, before tonight continues, I believe everyone deserves protection from fraud. Marcus's jaw tightened. Here it was. The trap. Giant screens behind the stage suddenly lit up with edited hospital footage. Marcus appeared near the records department moments before files were erased. Gasps spread through the crowd immediately. He destroyed evidence, someone whispered. I knew it. Vanessa pointed directly at Marcus. This man manipulated a dying woman and invented a fake identity for money. Phones lifted instantly. Cameras zoomed closer. Marcus stood frozen beneath the lights while wealthy strangers judged him again without mercy. Say something, Vanessa demanded. Marcus looked around slowly at the crowd. Would any of you believe me if I did? Silence answered him. Painful silence. Then Gloria stepped onto the stage beside Vanessa. My family welcomed this man with kindness, she lied smoothly. And he repaid us with deception. Tiny hope appeared unexpectedly when Kiera suddenly stepped out from the crowd. Nervous. Shaking. But brave enough to stand beside Marcus publicly. That is not true, she said softly into the silence. Vanessa snapped immediately. You are a waitress. Stay out of this. Kiera looked terrified, but remained beside Marcus anyway. Damien noticed that. So did the crowd. Tiny cracks were forming now. Then Damien calmly walked onto the stage himself. The ballroom went dead quiet. He took the microphone from Vanessa slowly. Controlled. Cold. Powerful. Interesting story, he said. But I have questions. Gloria's smile weakened instantly. Damien looked toward the giant screens. Why was the hospital footage edited? Nobody answered. Why were pages removed from Marcus Reed's records? Still silence. Damien slowly pulled the torn photograph from his jacket pocket. Gasps spread again when guests saw Charles Reed standing beside the child in the picture. And why, Damien continued carefully, does this photograph connect Marcus Reed to the Reed family before any of tonight's accusations existed? The room exploded into whispers. Vanessa's face lost color. Gloria stepped forward sharply. That picture proves nothing. Damien turned toward her. Then why were you trying to destroy it? If you were standing in that ballroom tonight, who would you believe? The rich family protecting its reputation? Or the broken man who never stopped carrying the same hidden truth? Tension tightened across the mansion like a wire ready to snap. Then obstacle struck one final time before the truth could surface. A senior Reed Aviation Board member suddenly stood up near the front row. Enough, he barked loudly. None of this matters without official proof. The crowd quieted instantly again. Gloria seized the moment fast. Exactly. She pointed toward Marcus one last time. This man is nobody. Marcus lowered his eyes slowly. The humiliation returned all over again. Then, the ballroom doors opened behind the crowd. Every head turned. A woman in a dark suit stepped inside carrying a silver briefcase against her chest. Evelyn Carter. And in her trembling hand, was the final sealed Reed family archive file. The ballroom doors closed slowly behind Evelyn Carter as every eye in the mansion locked onto the silver briefcase in her hand. Silence spread across the crowd like a wave. Phones lowered. Whispering stopped. Even the musicians near the stage froze. Evelyn walked forward carefully through the center aisle, her heels echoing against the marble floor. Gloria Cole's face lost every trace of confidence. Vanessa stepped backward beside her mother. Damien Brooks remained calm near the stage, but his eyes never left the briefcase. Marcus Reed stood motionless beneath the chandelier lights, still carrying years of humiliation on his shoulders. Yet for the first time all night, the room no longer looked at him like he was invisible. Evelyn stopped beside Damien and slowly placed the briefcase onto the table near the giant screens. The final archive file, she announced quietly. Recovered from the private Reed estate vault 1 hour ago. Gloria immediately stepped forward. You had no right, Damien cut her off sharply. Enough. His voice echoed across the silent ballroom. Emotional tension tightened instantly. Evelyn unlocked the briefcase slowly. Inside rested old legal files, hospital records, photographs, and a sealed envelope marked confidential family transfer order. Gasps spread through the crowd. Marcus looked shaken. Like every hidden wound inside him was suddenly being dragged into the light. Evelyn carefully lifted the first document. Birth registration correction, she read calmly. Original name, Marcus Charles Reed. Silence exploded across the mansion. Several guests turned immediately toward Marcus. Others toward Gloria. Phones slowly lowered now instead of rising. Nobody laughed anymore. Vanessa whispered under her breath, no, Evelyn continued. Biological father listed, Charles Reed. The ballroom froze completely. Marcus closed his eyes for one painful second. 20 years of confusion suddenly had a name. Damien slowly turned toward the crowd. The man you called a scammer, he said quietly, was born into the very family everyone thought he was lying about. Public silence hit harder than shouting ever could. Gloria stepped forward desperately. These papers could still be forged. Evelyn opened another file immediately. Then perhaps hospital surveillance records will help. The giant screens behind the stage flickered alive. Grainy old footage appeared from St. Mary's Community Shelter 20 years earlier. A frightened young black woman carried a baby wrapped in the same worn blanket now hidden inside Marcus's wooden box. Beside her stood Gloria Cole. The room gasped together. Gloria looked frozen. The video continued silently. Gloria handed papers to a hospital administrator. Money exchanged hands. Then the administrator changed the infant name on the transfer file. Marcus's breathing stopped. Vanessa covered her mouth in horror. "Mom," she whispered shakily. Damien's voice turned cold. "You knew." Gloria shook her head wildly. "It was not what you think." But the next document destroyed her defense instantly. Evelyn opened the sealed envelope and removed a handwritten letter signed by Charles Reed himself. "If anything happens to me," she read slowly, "my son Marcus must remain protected from anyone seeking control of the Reed estate." The crowd erupted into whispers again. One elderly investor stood abruptly. Charles Reed disappeared 2 months after writing that letter. Another guest whispered, "She hid the child." Marcus looked physically shaken now. Like the truth hurt more than the lies ever did. Aunt Lillian's weak voice suddenly echoed from the back of the ballroom where nurses had wheeled her inside quietly moments earlier. "Your mother begged them not to take you away," she whispered through tears. Marcus slowly turned toward her. She knew they would destroy her if she fought back. Emotional shock spread across the mansion. Vanessa looked at Marcus with horror now. She remembered slapping him. Mocking him. Calling him worthless in public. But the broken mechanic she humiliated was never a fraud. He was the missing Reed heir. Gloria made one final desperate move. "I did it to protect this family," she shouted. Damien stepped closer slowly. "No," he answered coldly. "You did it to control it." Then Evelyn revealed the final evidence. A signed financial transfer proving Gloria received monthly payments from a hidden Reed estate account for 20 years after Marcus disappeared. The room exploded again. Every lie collapsed at once. Gloria staggered backward as the crowd stared at her in disgust. Marcus stood completely still beneath the ballroom lights, tears filling his eyes for the first time all night. Not because he became rich. But because the world finally saw the truth he carried alone his entire life. Then Damien turned slowly toward Gloria one final time and asked the question that made the entire mansion hold its breath. If Marcus was never the fraud, then who told the world he was? If Marcus was never the fraud, then who told the world he was? Damien Brooks's question echoed through the silent ballroom like thunder. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Gloria Cole stood frozen beneath the chandelier lights while every guest in the mansion stared directly at her now. The same people who laughed at Marcus days ago were suddenly afraid to even whisper. Phones slowly lowered. Champagne glasses stopped clinking. The truth had changed the room completely. Gloria finally shook her head desperately. "You do not understand," she whispered. "I protected this family." Damien's voice remained cold and controlled. "You destroyed a child's life." Emotional shock rippled through the crowd again. Marcus stood silently near the stage holding the old wooden box against his chest. His hands trembled slightly. Not from anger. From pain. 20 years of humiliation suddenly made sense. The poverty. The missing records. The fake stories. The reason nobody ever came looking for him. Vanessa slowly turned toward her mother with tears forming in her eyes. "You knew." Gloria reached for her daughter. "Vanessa, listen to me, "You knew," Vanessa repeated again, this time broken. Aunt Lillian began crying quietly from her wheelchair near the ballroom entrance. His mother begged them to let her keep him, she whispered through tears. But money always speaks louder than poor women. Public silence crushed the mansion again. Damien carefully lifted the signed transfer records from the table. These documents confirm that Gloria Cole authorized the removal of Marcus Charles Reed from the Reed family registry. Gasps spread across the room. Evelyn Carter stepped forward next. And these financial records prove she received private estate payments for hiding the child's identity. Gloria looked around wildly now. Nobody defended her. Not the investors. Not the socialites. Not even Vanessa. The power she controlled for years was collapsing in public. "I did what I had to do," Gloria snapped suddenly. Charles Reed was weak. He would have given everything away to that child. Marcus finally looked up slowly. His eyes filled with hurt more than rage. "I was just a child." That sentence shattered the room harder than any scream could have. Several guests lowered their heads immediately. Even the reporters stopped recording for a moment. Damien stepped beside Marcus quietly. Not above him. Beside him. "No one will call you a liar again," he said calmly. Gloria tried one final time to save herself. "There is no DNA proof." Evelyn opened another file instantly. There did not need to be. She revealed Charles Reed's signed inheritance amendment dated weeks before his disappearance. "In the event my son Marcus Charles Reed is found alive," she read carefully, "all voting shares, trust access, and family protections transfer immediately to him." The ballroom erupted into stunned whispers. The missing heir was real. Marcus was real. And the poor mechanic everyone mocked now legally stood above many of the wealthy people staring at him tonight. Gloria staggered backward into a chair. "No," Damien turned toward the Reed Aviation Board member who doubted Marcus earlier. "Do you still believe he is nobody?" The older man lowered his eyes silently. Status reversal hit the room completely now. Vanessa slowly walked toward Marcus with tears running down her face. "Marcus. I did not know." Marcus looked at her quietly for a long moment. Then he answered softly, "You did not need to know I was rich to treat me like a human being." Silence. Pure silence. Vanessa broke down crying immediately. The crowd looked away from her now with embarrassment instead of admiration. Gloria tried to speak again, but Damien raised his hand sharply. "No more lies tonight." His voice carried authority through the ballroom. "Security will escort Gloria Cole from all Reed family properties pending legal investigation." Two security guards stepped forward calmly. "No violence. No shouting. Just consequence. Public consequence." Gloria looked around desperately for support one last time. Nobody moved. Nobody defended her. The same social power she used against Marcus had abandoned her completely. As security escorted her toward the doors, she looked back at Marcus in disbelief. The poor man she mocked and erased now stood in the center of the mansion as the rightful Reed heir. Marcus closed his eyes briefly as tears finally escaped down his face. Aunt Lillian smiled weakly through her own tears. "Your mother would be proud of you." Tiny emotional peace finally reached him. Damien then carefully picked up the old silver bracelet from the evidence table and placed it back into Marcus's hand. "This was never proof of wealth," he said quietly. "It was proof you belonged." Marcus stared at the bracelet silently. The room around him no longer looked at him with disgust. They looked at him with respect. But before the night could fully settle, Evelyn stepped closer carrying one final envelope stamped with the Reed family seal. "There is one more thing," she said softly. Marcus looked confused. Evelyn handed him the envelope carefully. "Your father left instructions for the day you finally came home." "Your father left instructions for the day you finally came home." Evelyn Carter's voice softened as she placed the sealed Reed family envelope into Marcus Reed's trembling hands. The ballroom remained silent around him. Not the cruel silence from the restaurant days earlier. This silence felt different. Heavy with regret. Heavy with truth. Marcus looked down at the envelope slowly. His real name still echoed through the mansion. Marcus Charles Reed. For years he carried that name like a wound nobody believed. Now it stood in front of the entire city. Real. Protected. Finally seen. Damian Brooks stepped beside him quietly. You do not have to open it here. Marcus looked around the ballroom. The same wealthy crowd that once laughed at him now avoided his eyes. Vanessa stood frozen near the stage, tears staining her makeup. Gloria Cole had already been escorted away. Her power ended not with violence, but with truth. Aunt Lillian smiled weakly from her wheelchair. Go ahead, baby, she whispered softly. You waited long enough. Marcus carefully opened the envelope. Inside rested a handwritten letter and a gold keycard marked Reed Family Estate, Private Access. His hands shook as he unfolded the letter. The ink had faded with time. But the words remained clear. To my son Marcus, he read softly. The ballroom went silent again. If this letter reaches you, then the truth survived longer than I did. Never believe your worth depends on money. The world may hide your name, but it can never erase your blood. Tears rolled down Marcus's face quietly. Damian lowered his head respectfully. Even the investors standing near the stage looked emotional now. The letter continued. One day, when you are ready, the Reed estate will open its doors to you. Not because you are rich. But because you belong there. Emotional release swept through the mansion. Marcus closed his eyes briefly as years of shame finally began leaving his shoulders. Tiny memories returned. The old bracelet. The hidden photograph. The blanket. The voice of his mother calling him by his real name before everything disappeared. Aunt Lillian reached for his hand carefully. Your mother never stopped loving you, she whispered through tears. Marcus knelt beside her slowly. And you never stopped protecting me. She smiled gently. Poor people protect each other with love when they cannot protect each other with power. Nearby, Vanessa finally stepped closer. No cameras mattered anymore. No guests. No status. Just shame. Marcus, her voice cracked. I am sorry. Marcus looked at her quietly. Not angry. Just tired. You were ashamed of me before you knew who I was. Vanessa broke down crying again. I thought money made people valuable. Marcus answered softly, no. Character does. Silence followed. Peaceful silence this time. Weeks later, the city of Atlanta looked at Marcus Reed differently. Not as a scandal. Not as a joke. But as the rightful Reed heir who survived being erased. Yet Marcus did not become cruel after gaining power. That surprised people most. He restored Aunt Lillian's medical care permanently. He reopened the old community garage where he once worked and created training scholarships for young mechanics from poor neighborhoods. And above the garage entrance, he placed a small silver plaque with one sentence, "Dignity belongs to everyone." Damian helped oversee the legal restoration of Marcus's family rights quietly, without turning it into a spectacle. The Reed estate opened its private records fully. Gloria Cole lost her influence, her board access, and the social status she protected for decades. But Marcus never celebrated her downfall publicly. Because real justice already happened the moment the truth was finally believed. One quiet evening, Marcus stood alone inside the private Reed aviation hangar. The same private jet from the old photograph rested beneath soft lights nearby. He held the silver bracelet in one hand and the restored family photo in the other. This time, nobody could cut him out of the picture anymore. Damian approached quietly from behind. The board approved your final inheritance transfer this morning. Marcus gave a small smile. I spent my whole life thinking I was unwanted. Damien looked at him calmly. You were hidden. There is a difference. Marcus glanced toward the open hangar doors where the Atlanta skyline glowed peacefully in the distance. Then he looked back at the family photo one final time before placing it carefully inside a glass frame near the jet entrance. Not hidden anymore. Honored. Remembered. Finally home. And somewhere beyond the noise of money, power, and lies, the little boy who once stood in the rain after being humiliated in public finally understood something important. Never mock someone because they look poor. Never measure human worth by clothes, status, or money. The truth may be delayed. It may be buried. But one day, it will rise in front of everyone. And when it does, dignity always shines brighter than wealth.